I had just woken up from heart surgery, my chest still aching when the first thing I saw stopped me cold. My wife, restrained in bed, sedatives dripping steadily into her veins. Her eyes looked tired, confused, but alert. And then I noticed the papers on the table, documents David had prepared to declare I could no longer control my $40 million company. My heart wasn't pounding from surgery. It was pounding from shock. How could things have gone this far? If you've ever faced betrayal, you'll understand this feeling. Before I continue, please subscribe and comment where you're listening. Now, let me tell you what happened next. After that first terrifying moment in the hospital, I tried to steady my breathing. My mind kept replaying what I had just seen. Laura, my wife, the woman I had trusted for decades, restrained, and David, my own son, preparing to take control of everything I had built. It didn't make sense. I had always thought our family was solid, happy, unshakable. I am Robert Miller. I'm 62, and I've spent my life building a tech company in San Francisco. What started in a small garage grew into a $40 million business, and I had planned to retire quietly in the next few years, watching it continue to thrive under careful leadership. I thought I had everything under control, and I thought I knew my family. Laura is 58, quiet, intelligent, always caring for everyone around her. She had been the center of our family's stability, the one who reminded me to slow down to enjoy life outside the office. Our home was calm. Our dinners were peaceful. Our conversations, even when serious, always ended with a sense of togetherness. I never expected that same sense of trust could be weaponized against me. David, he's 35, our son, and the CFO of the company. Ambitious, yes, but I had always believed he would follow the path of integrity. He had helped the company grow, made smart decisions. But ambition can be subtle. I didn't notice the way his eyes lingered on financial statements during family dinners, the quiet way he suggested changes that seemed practical but were really self-serving. I thought he wanted the company to succeed, not to control it completely. Before my surgery, everything had felt calm. I had trusted my team, my family, even my own health recovery. The operation went smoothly. The doctors assured me I would be home in a few weeks, healing in comfort. I imagined quiet mornings with Laura, afternoons, walking through our neighborhood, maybe even sharing more time with David as he stepped into more responsibilities at the company. Life felt simple, and I felt content. But waking up in that ICU, smelling antiseptic, and the faint tang of sedatives, hearing monitors beep steadily in the background, it was like waking into a different world. Everything I had counted on, every familiar face, seemed to carry hidden intentions. I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever feel safe again. Not my home, not my company, not even the people I loved the most. I stared at Laura for a long moment, her hand barely moving, restrained under soft straps, and I wondered how could a life I thought was steady be unraveling before my eyes? And more importantly, what had David planned while I was asleep, vulnerable, trusting him? As I tried to make sense of it, the questions kept coming. Why was Laura restrained? Why did the hospital staff act distant, almost cautious? And why had my son begun positioning himself to take everything I had built? I didn't have answers yet, but I knew one thing. This was only the beginning. If you've ever felt the ground shift beneath you, keep watching. The story only gets darker from here, and the truth behind my family's betrayal is even more shocking. Comment below if you've ever faced a moment where you didn't recognize the people closest to you. And stay tuned, because what happened next would change everything. After staring at Laura for what felt like hours, I finally spoke, my voice trembling. "Laura, are you okay?" The nurse standing a few feet away glanced at me with a practiced neutrality. "She needs rest, Mr. Miller. The doctor insists she stay in bed and avoid any stress." I froze. Rest, stress. Laura had been fully alert when I had called earlier. Her mind, her body, everything seemed fine. Yet here she was, restrained, sedatives flowing, her eyes blinking slowly, as if resisting a fog I couldn't see. Something didn't add up. The smell of the antiseptic mixed with the faint chemical scent of sedatives. Machines beeped steadily, almost taunting in their monotony. I tried to catch the nurse's gaze, hoping for some explanation, but she looked away, distracted, careful. And then I saw him, David, leaning casually against the doorway, a faint smile on his lips. "Dad, you need to rest too," he said softly. "You've just had surgery. Don't worry about her. I've got everything under control." Control. The word lingered in the room, sharp and cold. I should have felt comforted, but instead, an uneasy tightness gripped my chest. He wasn't looking at Laura. His eyes flicked to the documents on the table, the files stacked neatly next to his briefcase. My instincts, dulled by sleep and pain, suddenly snapped awake. Something was wrong. I forced myself to move closer, noticing small details, the subtle way he adjusted papers, as if testing something, the quick glance at his watch, the way the nurse's posture stiffened as he spoke. These weren't casual actions. They were deliberate, calculated. And in that moment, the reality hit me slowly, terrifyingly. I couldn't understand. Why was my wife being held when she was perfectly fine? I tried to speak to demand answers, but my voice came out weak. David stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. I just want what's best for you, Dad. Maybe it's time to start thinking about stepping back. I can handle things. It sounded caring, too caring. The words were smooth, but the intent beneath them was jagged sharp. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the man I had raised with the one standing before me, smiling while my world quietly shifted. Every detail, the sedated Laura, the distant staff, the documents clicked into a pattern that made my stomach turn. I glanced at Laura again. Her eyes met mine briefly, a silent plea I couldn't yet respond to. Her hand twitched against the restraints, subtle but desperate. The monitors continued their rhythm, the antiseptic stung my senses, and the realization pressed in from all sides. David had started moving, and he wasn't planning to stop. That day in the hospital, everything familiar began to feel foreign. I had woken up from surgery expecting recovery, love, and support. Instead, I was staring into the first cracks of a betrayal that ran deeper than I could have imagined. And in that silence, heavy and tense, I understood one terrifying truth. This was just the beginning. David's ambition had already taken its first step, and I had to be ready to see how far he would go. If you've ever had someone close act in ways you didn't expect, comment below. Keep watching. What happens next will reveal the real lengths someone can go when blinded by greed. After that day in the ICU, I returned home, my body weak from surgery, but my mind spinning faster than ever. The house felt different, almost hollow. Laura remained quiet, sedated more than necessary, her usual warmth replaced by a fragile, muted presence. Every time I tried to speak with her, the nurses or aides quickly intervened, insisting she rest. It felt wrong, but what could I do? I wasn't fully recovered, and my strength was still fragile. David, on the other hand, was everywhere. He moved with an ease that made it seem natural, yet every gesture, every word, carried a weight I couldn't ignore. Dad, he said one evening, sitting across from me in the living room, maybe it's time to think seriously about retiring. You need peace. I can manage the company now. The words sounded normal, caring even, but my heart tightened with unease. I had spent decades building that company. $40 million. Employees who trusted me. Projects I had nurtured from idea to reality. And yet David's soft voice and insistence felt like a slow, quiet invasion. Over the next few days, the small signs began piling up. Files on my desk started disappearing, replaced with copies stamped and annotated. Office keys I had always kept in a safe location were missing. My phone lines at work were mysteriously diverted, and emails I expected to see were delayed or sometimes never came. I remember one afternoon standing in the study watching David sort through papers as if he had every right to be there. "I'm just helping Dad," he said casually when I confronted him. "It's for the family. We don't want to leave things in chaos if something happens to you." Chaos. The word landed heavily. I had never imagined my own son would speak to me this way, and yet the evidence was everywhere. Documents that should have required my signature had already been forwarded. Bank accounts I had opened decades ago had subtle changes I didn't authorize. Every interaction seemed to be a step toward consolidating control steps I wasn't even aware I needed to guard against. Then came the realization that hit me the hardest. Laura, my wife, the woman I trusted with my life, was being kept sedated more than medically necessary. I discovered a small video from the hospital cameras, one that had been sent accidentally to my phone by a staff member. I watched as nurses gently restrained her administered sedatives and whispered reassurances that weren't meant for her to understand. The reason wasn't medical. It was to prevent her from interfering, from asking questions, from reminding me or David of what was right. I felt the weight of betrayal settle in my chest. David was no longer my son who had made mistakes or been ambitious. He had become a master of manipulation, using the people around him, including his mother, as pawns. The air in our home, once filled with laughter and calm, now carried an almost imperceptible tension. Every glance, every word, every gesture seemed loaded with hidden meaning. And then I saw it, an email on my office computer. I had thought it was a reminder from my assistant, but it was different. The sender, David. The subject line, preparation for transfer of control. My hands trembled as I opened it. Dad might not survive the recovery. Prepare documents to transfer control of the $40 million company to me. I will ensure the transition is smooth for the family. The words blurred before my eyes. I read them twice, 3 times, unable to comprehend the depth of what I was seeing. This wasn't a casual suggestion or an overzealous act of ambition. This was premeditated, calculated, and the person planning it was my own son. That night I sat in the study, staring at the empty chair across from me where David had been moments before. The silence in the room was heavy, almost suffocating. I thought about everything I had taught him, every lesson in ethics, responsibility, and trust. How had it come to this? How had the boy I had raised with love and care become someone who would plan to strip me of everything while I was vulnerable? David confronted me directly a few days later, smiling as he approached. "Dad," he said, his tone almost casual, "I'm just helping. You're not competent enough to decide on these matters anymore. You need to rest, and I can handle the company. Everyone will thank me later." It was chilling, not because of anger, but because of the cold efficiency behind his words. He had framed it as help, as care, but the intention was clear. I realized then that my heart wasn't pounding from surgery anymore. It was pounding from the betrayal, closing in, slow and relentless. I began noticing the subtle manipulations everywhere. At the office, David had started moving key files to a lawyer he had retained secretly. Financial records were altered accounts, subtly restructured. My signature, once sacred, was being forged. The employees, unsure of who was truly in charge, began to hesitate, uncertain of loyalty. At home, Laura remained sedated for longer periods. The staff's explanations sounded reasonable on the surface, but I could see the pattern. Every time she began to assert herself, to speak, or to question David's suggestions, she was quieted. The woman who had always been the backbone of our family was silenced. And David, he watched it happen with a calm, calculated smile. I tried speaking to him directly. "David, what are you doing? This isn't right." He leaned back, casually, crossing his arms. "I'm protecting the family, Dad. You've had your time. Let me handle the tough decisions. You just focus on getting better." It was like he had rehearsed the lines, every word designed to disarm, to make me doubt myself, to make me feel incompetent. But inside I knew the truth. Every action, every subtle manipulation, every sedative administered to Laura, every document forwarded to lawyers, it was all part of a plan. Weeks passed, and the betrayal grew more apparent. David had taken control of communications with partners and investors. Meetings I had scheduled were quietly canceled or attended in my place by him. Contracts were signed, funds moved, and I realized that if I didn't act soon, he would consolidate full control of the company without a single obstacle. And yet there was one mistake he made, one oversight that I noticed in the flurry of his ambition. His overconfidence had led him to leave evidence, scattered emails, copied documents, even hospital notes detailing Laura's sedation and the reasons for it. He had believed he was untouchable, and in that arrogance he exposed himself. I sat late at night, chest still tender from surgery, and made a decision. I wouldn't confront him immediately. I wouldn't show my awareness. I needed to be patient, to observe, to gather everything he was leaving behind. Every email, every medical note, every manipulated document, I would collect it. The house was quiet, but heavy with tension. Laura slept, restrained, sedated, unaware of the danger that had surrounded her. David moved around, confident in his control, believing he was untouchable. And I was learning a new patience, the kind that only betrayal can teach. In those days, the truth became undeniable. I wasn't just recovering from surgery anymore. I was recovering from betrayal, from deception, from the person I had trusted most in the world. David had overstepped every boundary, and yet he had also given me the tools to expose him. Every morning I watched Laura, restrained, fragile, yet still with the spark of intelligence in her eyes. I thought about how she would react when she knew the truth. Every document David had moved, every email he had sent, every signature he had forged, they were all part of his plan, and all of them were evidence. By the time I felt strong enough to move beyond my hospital room and into the strategy ahead, I knew one thing for certain: David had underestimated me. He believed I was weak, vulnerable, incapable of noticing the web he had spun. He believed he had closed every door, controlled every move, and silenced every voice that could oppose him. But he had left cracks. Tiny cracks, yes, but cracks I could see, and I would use them. I realized that betrayal, especially from someone you love, doesn't just hurt. It teaches. It sharpens your senses. It forces patience and strategy, and most importantly, it shows you the path to justice if you are willing to take it. As I sat there in the study watching David leave after yet another helpful conversation, I felt a strange mixture of anger, sadness, and clarity. The man I had raised as my son had become the architect of my turmoil, but I also understood the power of the position I still held. He may have controlled appearances, but the truth was still mine. And in that truth I found the first spark of a plan, a way to turn his ambition against him without ever raising my voice, without ever risking my health, and without ever letting Laura suffer further. At that moment, as I stared at the empty chair he had vacated, I made a silent vow. David would not take my life's work. He would not silence my wife. And above all, he would face the consequences of his choices one way or another. If you've ever had someone you trusted start to take control of everything you've built, comment below. Keep watching, because the story doesn't end with betrayal. Sometimes it's only the beginning of a reckoning, and what happened next would change everything. Just when I thought the situation couldn't get any more twisted, an unexpected call changed everything. My old friend and personal lawyer, someone I had trusted for decades, rang me late one evening. His voice was calm, but there was an edge of urgency that made my chest tighten. "Robert, I've been reviewing some of the company documents," he said slowly, "and I think you need to see this. David has forged signatures on shareholder agreements. He didn't just move files. He's trying to transfer control of the company to himself." I felt my stomach drop. All the careful planning, all the quiet patience I had been forcing myself to maintain it, was more urgent now. But even in that shock, a strange clarity came over me. David had thought he was clever, untouchable, invincible, but in his overconfidence he had left clear evidence behind. I don't understand," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "He thought he was being smart, but he left it in plain sight." "Yes," my lawyer confirmed. "Every email, every copied document, even the way the hospital records were adjusted. He made mistakes. He was too careful with appearances, but not careful enough with proof. You can use this." I sat in silence, letting the words sink in. All the times I had felt powerless watching David maneuver around me felt like preparation for this moment. Every small action he had taken, every manipulation, had left a trail that was now mine to follow. It was almost poetic. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a small, quiet smile. Not because I felt relief, but because the situation had shifted. David's arrogance had blinded him, and now I could see the path forward clearly. I didn't have to rush. I didn't have to confront him immediately. I just had to gather, observe, and prepare. I need to collect everything I said finally. Emails, documents, medical records. Everything he's left behind, and we'll need to make sure the company board sees it. He can't deny what's in black and white. My lawyer agreed. "Be careful, Robert. Don't let him suspect that you're aware. Let him continue believing he's in control. The more confident he feels, the faster he'll trap himself." I hung up and looked at Laura, still restrained in bed, quiet and fragile. She had no idea of the depth of the deception surrounding her. But now, at least I had the tools to protect both her and the company. The plan wasn't revenge, yet it was observation, preparation, and patience. I was stunned. David thought he had outsmarted me, but he had left all the evidence in plain sight. And now I had the clarity I needed. His ambition had created a roadmap for my response. From that moment, a quiet determination settled over me. I would stay silent. I would appear weak. I would let David continue his confident play, believing that everything was under his control. And while he plotted and maneuvered, I would gather the proof that would expose him completely. If you've ever seen someone overreach because they thought no one was watching, you'll understand this feeling. Comment below if you've ever caught someone in their own trap. And stay with me, because now the stage is set for the silent strategy that would change everything. After that call with my lawyer, I knew I had to be careful. Any wrong move, any hint that I was aware of David's schemes, and he would change tactics, cover his tracks, and make everything disappear. So I stayed silent. I acted weak, fragile, still recovering from surgery, letting him believe he had won. Every day I watched him move through the house and the office with quiet confidence. Every file he touched, every document he signed, every decision he tried to push forward, I observed. I made notes in secret saved emails, screenshots, and even subtle recordings where possible. Each piece of evidence was a puzzle piece that would later reveal the full picture. Laura remained heavily sedated, restrained when necessary, but I ensured that no further harm came to her. The house was quiet, almost painfully calm, with only the hum of machines and occasional footsteps. I spoke gently to her when she was alert, holding her hand, letting her know I was still there, still watching. Her faint smiles and small nods gave me strength. I couldn't let David see any of it. At the company, I discreetly consulted a trusted friend, someone who had been with us since the beginning, who understood the values and the stakes. Together, we coordinated quietly, ensuring that information could be gathered without alerting David. Every conversation was measured, every interaction carefully designed to maintain the illusion that I was still weak, still vulnerable. The tension built slowly. David continued to make moves, completely confident that the company, the house, even my wife, were all under his control. He bragged casually to staff about taking over responsibilities and even hinted to investors that I was stepping back. But every word, every action was now being documented by me. His ambition was his blind spot. I kept reminding myself of the goal: patience. Let him continue, let him overreach. Each email, each unauthorized signature, each manipulation of Laura's care, he was building his own trap, and I was ready to step in at the perfect moment. In those quiet moments, I reflected on everything I had taught David over the years: responsibility, trust, integrity, and yet here he was acting without either. I felt a mix of sadness and resolve. Sadness for the son I thought I knew, and resolve that justice, not anger, would be the way forward. I kept everything silent, I whispered to myself one evening, watching David leave the study with another folder just to watch him trap himself with his own ambition. That night, I looked over the collection of documents I had secretly compiled. Emails, hospital records, company files, everything was in place. Soon David's confidence would meet reality, and the truth would come out. But until then, I remained calm, careful, and patient. If you've ever had to wait silently while someone overreached, comment below. Stay with me, because now the pieces are in place, and the moment of truth, the reckoning, will soon arrive. The day I had been waiting for finally arrived. David walked into my office, smiling as usual, carrying yet another folder as if it contained the keys to our future. I greeted him with a calm nod, pretending to be weaker than ever, still recovering from surgery, still dependent. He didn't suspect a thing. I waited until the meeting with the company board, a routine review they had scheduled weeks earlier. David had been preparing, confident, certain that the transfer of control he had been orchestrating would go unnoticed. He spoke to the board as if he were the rightful authority, explaining decisions he claimed I had approved. Every word, every gesture was designed to reinforce his dominance. And then it was my turn. I simply stood, walked calmly to the table, and handed the lawyer in attendance the documents I had collected over the past weeks. Emails, copies of forged signatures, hospital records showing Laura's unnecessary sedation, all laid out in plain sight. No emotion, no dramatics, just facts. The room went silent. David's confident smile faltered the moment he realized what was happening. He tried to speak, to explain, to control the narrative, but the evidence was undeniable. Every forged signature, every manipulated document, every plan to seize control of the company, all there perfectly documented. I watched him struggle as the board reviewed the materials. His overconfidence had been his downfall. Each piece of proof he had left behind was like a nail in the coffin of his ambitions. The very actions he believed would secure his position were now exposing him completely. "David," I said quietly, letting my voice carry across the room, "these documents show exactly what you've done. Forgery, manipulation, and attempts to take control without authority. The board will review everything, and legal action will follow." He opened his mouth, but the lawyer raised a hand. "No explanations, Mr. Miller. The evidence speaks for itself." The shift in the room was immediate. Board members whispered among themselves, comparing dates, signatures, and emails. Investors who had been uncertain about the company's leadership now saw clearly what had been happening behind the scenes. David's credibility crumbled before their eyes. I felt a strange calmness as I watched him, not from pleasure or revenge, but from the satisfaction that truth and only truth had won. No threats, no shouting, no dramatics, just facts laid bare. The board made a swift decision. David was suspended from all company authority, pending a full investigation. The transfer documents he had prepared were voided. His attempts to manipulate the company and its shareholders were formally blocked. The room, once tense with uncertainty, now felt like it had been cleared of smoke, revealing the clarity of justice. I looked at David as he gathered his things, the color drained from his face. There was no anger in me, only quiet understanding. He had underestimated patience, underestimated the power of evidence, and underestimated the lengths I would go to protect both Laura and the company. Laura, who had been sedated and restrained for so long, was now free. She sat quietly in the room, watching, her eyes wide with confusion and relief. The staff moved, carefully ensuring her comfort, and I held her hand, letting her know she was safe. I simply handed the documents to the lawyer. I whispered almost to myself. She never saw it coming from me. The board confirmed the changes, ensuring that company control was restored to its rightful structure. Investors regained confidence and employees breathed easier knowing the truth had been revealed. David, once so confident in his plan, was left with his own reflection, exposed, powerless, and accountable. That day, I realized something important: revenge does not require violence. Justice can be delivered through patience, careful planning, and truth. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to threaten or intimidate. The facts spoke louder than any argument could, and they had dismantled David's ambition without harming anyone. If you've ever had someone betray your trust, comment below. Sometimes the best way to respond is with quiet strategy and unshakable truth. Stay with me because the story isn't over. There are consequences yet to come, and lessons for everyone involved. After the board meeting, the house felt different. The tension that had filled every corner for weeks began to lift, though it was replaced by a cautious quiet. David, once so confident and commanding, had been stripped of his authority, suspended from the company, and faced the reality of his actions. His ambition, once a silent threat, had been exposed for everyone to see. I watched him leave the office that evening, his posture stiff, the mask of confidence gone. The board had taken swift action, reviewing all shareholder rights, securing the company's future, and making sure no further manipulation could take place. Employees and partners alike now understood the truth, and the company began to stabilize. At home, the focus shifted to Laura. She had been sedated and restrained for so long, and I realized how much that had weighed on her, how much control had been taken from her. The nurses and aides gently removed the restraints and reduced the sedatives. Her first deep, unrestricted breath seemed to fill the room. I helped her sit up, supporting her as she adjusted to the newfound freedom. There was a subtle change in the air. The faint aroma of herbal tea from the kitchen mixed with the soft hum of the evening outside, creating a quiet warmth that hadn't existed in weeks. Laura smiled faintly, her eyes meeting mine with a mix of relief and lingering confusion. I didn't understand why, she began softly, her voice fragile but gaining strength. I held her hand, feeling the weight of everything that had happened, and simply said, "It's over now. You're safe." The simplicity of that sentence and the truth behind it seemed to calm her. I could feel her slowly regaining her own strength and presence. David's actions had consequences beyond the company. Our family relationships were fractured, the trust we had taken decades to build, now broken. Conversations were now cautious, every interaction measured. I knew it would take time for wounds to heal, if they ever fully would. The betrayal had left a mark, one that couldn't be erased. Even so, there was a sense of restoration. The company, once threatened by ambition and deception, was now secure. Laura, freed from manipulation and sedation, could begin to reclaim her life. And I, having faced the depth of betrayal and the weight of calculated ambition, felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that justice, not anger, had prevailed. I walked through the living room that evening, noting the subtle signs of life returning. Laura's teacup on the table, a small stack of books. She had begun to read again, the soft light casting gentle shadows across the room. It was calm. It was safe. And for the first time in weeks, it felt like home. If you've ever seen someone face the consequences of their own ambition, comment below. Stay with me, because the final chapter is coming: lessons learned, truths revealed, and the moral that binds it all together. Life slowly returned to a sense of normalcy, though nothing would ever be exactly the same. My health stabilized, my recovery continued, and I returned to the office with renewed focus. The company, once threatened by ambition and deceit, was now on secure footing. Employees and partners knew the truth, and stability was restored. Laura and I spent quiet mornings together, sipping tea, sharing soft conversation, and rebuilding the trust that had been shaken. Her recovery, both physical and emotional, was gradual, but each day brought a small victory. The warmth and calm she radiated reminded me why protecting her had been so essential. David faced the consequences of his actions. Suspended from authority, his credibility destroyed, he was left to reflect on choices that had taken him down a path of greed and betrayal. Our family bond was fractured, and I knew that some lessons may take a lifetime to truly sink in. I looked at him one last time quietly as he left the office for what felt like the final time, and wondered, would these lessons reach him before he learned to take responsibility for his actions? The moral became clear to me: ambition and betrayal can never triumph over truth and patience. Power and money are meaningless if they come at the expense of family, love, and integrity. I had witnessed how carefully laid plans of manipulation could be undone not with anger or force, but with calm observation, evidence, and measured action. As I reflected on everything, I realized the importance of vigilance, the necessity of patience, and the power of truth. Betrayal may strike from those closest to us, but justice, when delivered thoughtfully and fairly, can restore balance without harming the innocent. If you've ever faced betrayal or seen ambition spiral out of control, share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to follow more stories of real-life drama, justice, and family intrigue, please like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Life doesn't always go as planned. People don't always act as we hope. But the truth, when we have the courage to observe, prepare, and act, can always prevail. And with that, I finally felt a quiet sense of closure, knowing that for now justice had been restored and those I loved were safe.